Welcome to the Freedom CEO podcast. It's about becoming the chief decision maker over your life in order to step into a life of freedom. From business, health, wealth, charity, and giving back to just doing life on your own terms. I am your host, Shay Invidiata. I am an award-winning activist, change maker, and a multifaceted impact entrepreneur with over a decade of experience in business, philanthropy, and health and wellness. In this space, I'm going to be bringing you insights, not just from me, but from incredible thought leaders around the globe to help you start making decisions towards living a life of freedom so you can live a life you love. Are you ready, guys? Because we are going all in. Lauren Baptiste is enhancing today's work culture with a simple strategy. Prioritize your well-being, just like the hardworking professionals are dedicated to climbing the corporate ladder. As a life coach and consultant on a mission to help women level up at work and at home, Lauren brings more than 13 years of experience in corporate culture and workplace burnout, alongside her knowledge as a practitioner of Ayurveda, hormonal health, and other evidence-based modalities. This results in clients shifting from exhausted to energetic, cynical to optimistic, and ineffective to empowered. Lauren has consulted for major companies like IBM, Warner Music, Estee Lauder, and the United Nations, and notably has been published in Forbes. Today, she's on the Freedom CEO podcast to bring you insights to lead a better life. I really believe in perfect timing. And sometimes when things don't go according to what you have planned, I always think about why isn't it happening? When is it going to happen? And what is the message that needs to be heard? And today's guest on the Freedom CEO podcast is exactly that. We have had to book, rebook, change timing. I got a horrific migraine and I said, I got to rebook it because I know that this conversation needs to happen. So if you are tuning in today, know that this episode is for you. I'm so glad that you are here, and joining me is Lauren Baptiste. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited. I've been looking forward to this just as much as you.
I know, like it's been pretty crazy when you think of like, I had something, then you had something, and then I had something.
Just keep hot potato.
I know, right? And I think some people think, well, maybe it's just not meant to be. And sometimes that can be the case. But when it comes to conversations, for me, I'm like, there's a reason why. I don't necessarily think it's the universe, but when a message is so good, you have that polarity. And I'm like, it fuels me more where I'm like, we need to have a good conversation because somebody is waiting to hear what you have to bring to the table and the message that we're going to talk about today. So here we are.
Yay. Let's get into it. I'm like, let's go.
So for those who don't know you, and even for myself, you guys tuning in or wherever you're watching from, Lauren and I actually have never met in person. So I'm excited to also learn about your journey and your background. You've gone from the corporate hustle and the grind, if you will, into wellness. And obviously there's always a journey story. There's a pivotal moment where I'm sure you're like, okay, this is it. I've had enough. So let's start there. How long ago were you in corporate? What was that like for you? And then share with us, what was that moment?
Yeah, I was in corporate for 13 years. And somewhere along the line of that journey, I ended up burning out and ending up in a hospital. So that was my very clear, something's got to give moment.
Yeah. And what industry were you in? You don't need to name the company, but like what industry in corporate were you?
I was in financial services, so I moved around a little bit. I was working at a Big Four accounting firm. Anyone who finds me can see on LinkedIn or wherever I was. And it's not even about the company. It was, after having that experience, it was lessons learned about myself, which we'll go into, I'm sure. But it was in financial services in the accounting sphere at that time.
And were you just like completely overloaded with work that drove you to being in the hospital? Was it anxiety and stress? Probably a combination of all three.
Right. In the moment, I didn't even know what it was. When I went to the hospital, I thought it was a food allergy. And
Wow.
I had had all these symptoms of stress prior, but I had been ignoring them of, oh, it's just normal to have acne in my 20s on my chest, my face, and my back. Okay, it's normal to have irregular menstruation. It's normal to have, um, you know, bouts of like emotional roller coastering all of the time and feeling like that's just the way it is when you're working in the grind. You just have to put up with whatever comes your way. And that was what I was trained to think and convinced myself to think as a survival mechanism.
So when you got to the hospital, did you start to connect then that this could be your job related or like the environment that you were in, or did that come after the fact?
So the story, the way it ended up is I had been traveling, and to me, it was a mix of challenging bosses at the time, new environment as I recently transferred from accounting into consulting, and then also, just traveling, doing the weekly grind, like Monday morning flights, getting home Friday night, doing my laundry, sleeping, and repeating. So that was the container that like created that stress. And then from there, it was like trying to figure out what's going on. But I actually, in my story, I ended up going to the hospital 2 days in a row because the first day, everybody was under this belief that it was a food allergy because I had no reason to think it was anything else because I hadn't seen any of my colleagues go to the hospital from stress. I didn't know, we just all thought, oh, it must have been something I ate.
Crazy. And okay, so like when I think about finance in that industry, it's long hours. You're working anywhere between like 50 to 70 hours, sometimes like in a week.
Mm-hmm.
Typically, it's a dominant male industry, even still now, right? Like women are more in the financial sector than they ever have been before, but I would still say that it's still very underrepresented.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of pressure, I think, as a woman to show up, to perform, to do well. And for you, what was the drive? Like, what brought you into that industry that, you had the desire? We all get into our different careers for different reasons and passions. Like, what was it about it for you that you were like, yeah, I want to be in this?
I just laugh when you say that because I'm like, there's a lot of thoughts that come to mind when you ask. I mean, I always had wanted to start a business. So I went into accounting in college to say, well, at least let me cover the back end. And then when I graduated from college, it was in the recession period in 2007. So it was like, well, I had a marketing job, which was more front end to learn that side of the business, or I can have like more of a lucrative job in finance. So it just based on that, I was like, okay, let me go with what's more stable, what seems to be more lucrative and go from there. And then it just started to build piece by piece as I was at that company.
So it's interesting because, and you've talked about this as well. I've read this about you, that if we were to prioritize our well-being and put as much dedication, drive, time, effort, willingness of sacrifice, right? If you're working 70 hours a week, 80 hours a week, there's a lot of sacrifice there. If we were willing to put that same amount of energy and time instead of working or having that priority of climbing, quote unquote, that corporate ladder into our well-being, how do you think that would transform for people?
I love that. Honestly, I feel like the possibilities are unlimited if we really started to take care of ourselves. We're even starting to see some companies, some industries that are understanding the importance where they're even putting it in your annual review. Like, are you taking care of yourself? Because there's a cost to companies in terms of their margin of less sick days an employee takes. That, right? There's some of that like very logistical benefit of doing it. But then there's a productivity benefit. There's the person is happier, doesn't want to leave their job. They stay longer. That means they have to train less people because there's less turnover and churn. And it becomes a win-win-win for the company and for the employee.
Yeah. And so, it's so interesting when I think about putting wellness as the forefront, instead of doing it as like a business strategy, even from maybe a corporate standpoint, it really for an individual should be a life strategy, right? It's like creating your life, what I call like by design, and having your pillars of health and wellness in your life, and then filling in all of the blanks in between, and when you are stronger and you do level up in your health, in your wellness, like you had just mentioned, you do perform better. So you actually can do what would take you something, maybe let's call it 4 hours to do a task, would probably shave off time, right? Like you become more efficient as you get stronger, as you build better endurance for your mind and also for your physique as well.
100%.
So it's really interesting. And I think, and you would probably be able to speak to this quite in depth when we look at what's happened since 2020. And there has been an elevated amount of stress and anxiety. It's weird. We went on this roller coaster, right? Where it was like, for a lot of people, my industry is excluded from this, being in real estate, when everybody was, I shouldn't say everybody, when the majority of industries were binging, watching Netflix on the couch and having like this prolonged vacation or retirement party at home. It was like the real estate industry went into chaos of needing to pivot. But when I think of this roller coaster of calming down in business in some ways and taking more time off, but then being really stressed and anxious around what was going on externally. And then we saw that getting brought back into the workplace as companies were feeling that stress internally of how to now navigate all of their employees. And then of course we saw layoffs coming, which then vacation became over, right? Vacation time was over, like, yeah. And it was like, holy shit, now what? So when you think of prioritizing your health in circumstances like that, now what is your kind of like your advice to individuals? Forget corporate, because like they're always going to be there. For me, it's how do we help individuals become a better version of themselves to understand, like you said, making yourself, your wellness, that priority. Yeah. So talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah, I love it. The first thing that came to me as you were saying that is this quote. I don't know where it's like sourced from, but it's, if you don't focus on your wellness, you will focus on your illness. And sometimes we need something that strong or prolific to like wake us up, because the way that corporate can be is, as the individual is experiencing it, is like death by 1,000 cuts. Okay, can you stay out late tonight? We need you to work on this. This needs to be done by tomorrow. Okay, just one weekend you need to work. Okay, and then repeat, like year after year after year. And all of a sudden you're 10 years into a career and you're like, what just happened? Like, this is so overwhelming. And for a lot of people, it was COVID just happened. This is overwhelming, on top of a job that I was already really stressed about. It's funny that you mentioned the whole, like, I'm thinking like the moment of like the sourdough breads and that whole thing for a moment in that initial vacation. But a lot of people in the world that I see like had laptops already. So it was just keep working. There was even no downer, no time to breathe. It was just like, all right, you're working from home for the foreseeable future. Just keep rolling with it. And everyone's like, okay, your kids are now being homeschooled. Just deal with it. Okay. And just piled on piled on piled. Okay. I guess we don't need vacation right now, right? People weren't taking time off. And you could see like that is still something that people are unwinding years later, because they didn't take care of themselves. They didn't take the right amount of time off. They put everyone and everything into this survival mode where it's like, I just need to make sure we're okay, which makes sense in that crisis. But when it lasts years, it really drains our immunity. It really just takes a lot from our energy. And it just puts us in this place of like stuck or confusion or doubt, which a lot of people that come my way come to me experiencing, because they're like, I don't know what to do, even though I've been doing the same thing for 10 years. Like, something's got to change.
So for you, you mentioned 13 years. And I'm sure just exactly what you said, there's a lot of repetition and doing the same things over and over again. And they're not getting better. And you always think, I'll when I have time, I'll do this for myself. I'll get to that.
Right.
And I often say to people, there's a really strong probability that right now is the most amount of time you have. Because if you are a person under the age of 50, then you are probably still in growth mode of building, kids maybe growing up. That means more activities, more, whatever you're doing as a family. But right now is probably the most amount of time you have. So if you're waiting for that right time for things to slow down to take care of yourself, there's a good chance it's probably not going to happen, So it's about making time and creating space, or even something more drastic, which is part of your story. And I want to go back to that, of actually exiting from, which I refer to today as the matrix, and, stepping out of and unplugging from this corporate system that so many people are really plugged into and feeling reliable on. And when you come out of a circumstance like going through being hospitalized, you have this aha moment. And so share with us, when you got out of the hospital, did things change for you right away? Like in your mindset, were you like, oh, that was just an experience in the hospital and I'm going back to work?
My body responded that way. I went home that weekend. It was actually a Valentine's Day. I remember it really clearly. I stumbled into my date, in this stupor after flying home, after running from the hospital to the plane, back home to this date. And I had the weekend off. And I just remember all right, but I have to go back on Monday. And I did. But my mindset actually got worse. So I was at a point where it was bad. And then I realized this is really bad. And even being there felt more resistance than 2 weeks prior.
Right.
And it took me a little bit of time to figure out, where do I go from here? I didn't feel like I needed therapy, and coaching didn't seem like it wasn't accessible to me at that time. It wasn't so right now, years later, I feel and maybe because I'm in the world of it, it just feels like coaching is abundant. But in that moment, I didn't even know what that was. So that wasn't even a resource to me. So I just had to figure out, how do I take care of myself, given the tools that I've learned up until that point in my life.
So when did you make the decision to actually just leave corporate? And did you have a plan? Were you just taking time off for yourself, or were you I'm going to just start my own company now?
So I didn't leave for years after that experience. I stayed there and I started to build my own business and build my way out.
On the side, as a side hustle?
As a total side hustle. So I'd get home from work at 8 at night. I would work until midnight. So just getting it up and running in a place of I need to do this as fast as I can without burning out again. And it was just my focus day over day of how can I really support people? And it started to build where I was working with my teams and helping them with ad hoc coaching, and then speaking events on weekends, or saying I had to take a PTO and doing a small speaking event. And it just built until there was a point where then I started to go part-time in my career. And then as I started to ramp up my business, so they kind of worked together until my business took off, where I was then in that full place of safety of I'm good, and going from there.
So I think it's really interesting that, you went back, you stayed, but I think there's, some people, if you have no other option, right, for having income, or you don't know what else to do, it's understandable that that's what's paying the bills. That's your livelihood. It's been what you've been doing for 13 years.
Right.
Did it feel different for you because you all of a sudden now had a different vision? You had a different mission to build something that was bigger for you in your world than this corporate job. And now going from maybe a 40 to 60, 70 hour a week, if you're coming home at night and you're still working, you're adding on more hours. But I'm sure it must have felt different this time.
Right. It totally felt different. And that's where it was actually the greatest lesson of staying in corporate and focusing on my business was a great experiment in energy. Just because my work took up, let's say 60% of my actual day, is there a way that I don't have to give that 60%, 100% of my energy for that day? I started to simmer down in the sense that instead of being full flame, like A+ perfect student, overachiever, I learned how to do a really good job. I learned how to be really efficient. I learned how to delegate harder, which are a lot of the boundaries that I didn't have. I learned them as I was then building my business. So it was this great, I kind of call it like a playground for like learning and implementing my stuff in real time in corporate, and then even helping my colleagues who were there as well, so that they can see slowing down is speeding up, and learning how to take care of yourself does have an ROI just as great as your bonus, if not better. And that it takes work.
Oh, big time. It absolutely does. So, okay, you're building a side hustle, and this is what is today your coaching business, correct?
That's right.
And I mean, there is a coach for anything. A pet coach, confidence coach, mindset coach, fitness coach, like speaking coach. There's a coach for anything.
Yep.
So share with me, like, what are you specializing in? And I know that also Ayurvedic, I think you're an Ayurvedic practitioner as well. And how does that cross into your coaching business?
So my focus, I had a decision to make because I always had an affinity for health and well-being. Like even from growing up, I was in a family who did appreciate that. So that just grew with me as I continued on my journey. And so when I was at my pivotal point of like, what do I do with my business? Do I bring my accounting business expertise to health and wellness practitioners, or do I take my health and wellness affinity and bring that to hardworking corporate professionals? And after I was like trying both on at the same time for a while, and it was just a very clear, like the need was helping professionals find health and wellness in what they do and how they do it. So my coaching, my expertise is I work with the hardest working women and help them overcome billable hour burnout. So that's accountants, consultants, attorneys, and anyone who charges that has to do their timesheets is someone who I usually work with.
Oh my God. I like, and even just that alone, like when I think of the diversity of extremes, talk about polarity, right? Like hard, time, billable hours, the grind, and then Ayurvedic, like, whoa, coming in. For those tuning in that might not know Ayurvedic practices, could you just share what is that?
Sure. I like to say like Ayurveda comes from the lineage of India. Think of it like a traditional Chinese medicine, but from that Indian lineage. So Ayurveda dates back, they say, at least 3,500 years, and it's focused on more of a preventative health. And that's how we see it more in where we live in like Western society. But it also does scale up to include surgeries. It includes like deeper sciences as well. So I think we think of it as just like simple and preventative, which it is, but it is also in the moment too, where it can support bigger things as well.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, it's so needed for all of us, but definitely when you are in such a high-paced, high-strung, stress, deadlines, like you really need to have that balance to be able to release the tension, release the stress, bring your organs back into harmony I think a lot of people don't really realize how much your organs store emotions, store stress, anger, trauma, and talk about, yes, Chinese medicine, even as well, looking at like things like your liver that can be associated with anger, resentment. And so have you dived into some of that, even like with your clients, helping them understand the organ functions, like as that pertains to their job?
Yeah. Whenever I start with working with a client, they have like a few assessments that they'll work on. And one is around their dosha. And there are a lot out there who may be coming from the Ayurveda world that there's no such thing as like a dosha and whatever, and that's fine. But a lot of us in Western know of, if we know a little bit of Ayurveda, we've heard that term. And so we just identify where they are in their state. And I help to identify imbalance, because to your point, it's in that place of imbalance that disease forms. So the goal is not to have everybody be the same, but to find your balance for you. And that's what I love so much about Ayurveda, because it's a body-mind science that helps us come back to our true nature. And I think that's such a beautiful way to think about it. So when we think about, well, how do we use these practices to help hardworking women that are in these like fluorescent offices find their true nature? There may be only moments where they can go to the glass window and look at the moon from their office, or do small things like adding a certain spice to their breakfast to help better metabolize their food. There's little things, but it's those types of things that just can make such a big difference. And in Ayurveda, one thing that they say is everything that we do is either like medicine or like poison. And so for some of us, eating a salad for lunch every day might be medicine, but it's actually poison for a lot of us, where it's not always the best thing for us to eat every single day, every day of the year, all times of our life. So having that science really helps cater to what they need. And I try to provide it in a really efficient way so that they can just kind of run with really simple techniques to help them feel way better.
Have you noticed a pattern or a trend of, when you think of the industry and the different types of, people that you're working with, have you seen a pattern in the organs that either like kidneys are most affected, heart issues, I mean, obviously I'm sure that could be for like all industries, but, do you see this pattern where like liver problems, kidney problems, spleen, gallbladder? Have you noticed anything like that?
So I don't do pulse, and that's where you can really get deep in the like which organ. But I will say, when a lot of women come to me in this, and we can talk about at some point of even like why my company is called Akaloa and all of that. But we see a lot of menstrual health imbalance, irregular cycles, really heavy, painful cycles, infertility. Like that's what we see in Ayurveda. That's one of the way they say it is, it's like one of the organs that we actually don't need, right? You need a heart to beat. Right. You need lungs to breathe. You don't need a reproductive system. So a lot of times that's one of the first things to go. So I will see a lot of issues there. And then we kind of work backwards to the other vital tissues to say, okay, well, what else? How are things looking otherwise? And go from there. Yeah.
It's really interesting. I don't think I've ever made that either connection or heard somebody point that out, that the first organs or the first, things to kind of start to fail in the body are the organs that necessarily we can still live without, like a kidney, gallbladder, spleen, that's so interesting. I've never ever thought about that and had somebody make that connection.
Even like menopause, right? It's like, as we're shifting into our third act, it's like, well, we're not in the like baby making stage anymore, and we can let that go. And, that starts to dry up, and then it starts to kind of move through the process of the body of like slowing down. And it's just fascinating. I love to see like how the brain and the body work together with like women and life. And there's so many things to see if you just like sit back and witness. But we are always looking for like, what's the quick answer to fix the thing that I'm dealing with? What's the pill or the goop or the cream? So I don't have to think about it anymore. But if you zoom out, it's like, well, what's really happening? Why do we think that's happening so early? Why are women going through like so many more hysterectomies now? Or why are there so many more like early menopause happening to so many women right now? So it just creates a little bit of curiosity of like, what can we be doing to help our women out there?
Which is a great question. It's a good, what I was thinking, like I wanted to, move into as you're saying this is, regardless if you're in a corporate hustle or you've come out of 2020 to now, I think we've all experienced a great amount of stress, pressure, some form of hustle. And what can we be doing to be investing in mental health, even like energy management? Some people don't even know what that is. So we can unpack that. And thinking about personal development, I think a lot of people can get really overwhelmed with like, where do I even start with that? Mm-hmm. So what's your recommendation at the basics, at the foundation level of going, okay, if you know you need to be making a change, where's the best place to start? What do you recommend?
I always like to start with our time and really say, how much of every day are you taking care of yourself? And for a lot of us, it's like -2 hours. Like we are overcommit to the things that we think we can do in a day, and it has us always feeling behind. So whenever I talk to someone, whenever I start working with someone, the commitment we make is 15 minutes a day.
Okay.
And starting with something that small is cumulative in spite of it feeling so tiny. It's actually, I found it to be the sweet spot where like you really can't say no to it, because if you can say no to like an hour workout class because you got to take 30 minutes to get there, then you got to shower after, and it can become like a half a day event just to like go for, a ride. But if you can give yourself 15 minutes, it's enough to go for a walk. It's enough to stretch your body. It's enough to journal. It's enough to do some breath work. You can sit with a coffee and a blanket and watch the sunrise, right? It doesn't matter what you do, but it's like, can you carve out time that's for you, for pleasure, that feels good, that creates like less stress in your body? Right. And that's always for me the starting point, because if you say you don't have 15 minutes to give me, then that means it's not a priority for you.
100%. I mean, anybody who knows me, you don't even need to know me for that long, but I often say whatever you're saying yes to means you're saying no to something else. Mm-hmm. And really needing to check what are you actually saying yes to that's robbing you from where you want to be going in life, how you want to be feeling in your own body, how you want to be showing up in your family for your partner. And we all make time for things that are a priority to us and that we want to do. We all have people in our life that ask our time and we're like, no, I don't have time for that call today. I can't meet you. But if so-and-so, you fill in the blank, calls or texts, you're like, I'll move some stuff around and I'll see you later tonight.
Yeah.
Because it's a priority. Same thing with like scrolling on Instagram, right? Like the average person is on Instagram for like over 2 hours a day. It's something crazy, right? Like it's a long time. So when you think of taking away from Instagram scrolling and for me, that's spending and wasting time. Where taking that time that you're wasting and investing it into 15 minutes of self-development, where that is an investment of time, because there's an ROI, there's a return of your time investment on yourself.
Yeah.
Way better spent, right? Way better spent. And then I'm sure you're probably then coaching people through what I call like, or, very common to hear, habit stacking. Once you can do 15 minutes, it's like, okay, now what else can you reintegrate once you've established that habit? And from there, what does that look like? How can you expand that? How can you introduce something on top of that to continue with your personal development, energy check-in, physique, all of those good things?
Right.
So I think when you think of like leadership today, as an important message, I think for around like health, well, you would say this as well. This is, I'm sure, what you go in and you talk to corporates. What does that message look like? Like when you think of leadership, integrating it with health and wellness?
From a top-down perspective, it feels like being the change. A lot of companies, and I've gotten to be really selective of like who I work with at this point, because I don't want to just work for a company that comes in and they're looking for like a check the box of, okay, come in, speak. We did this for our people. Like a 1 hour conversation is like going to end their burnout. Like that doesn't work. And I am always very transparent about that. I'm like, there's not a good ROI on that 1 hour, because they're going to close out of the window or they're going to leave the conference room that I'm in, and then they're going to go right back into the work and not think back. Yeah, I think it's really important and we're thinking about leadership, of them being an example of what's possible. What I hear so often, even at the leadership level, because even when you're at the top, there's more people on top of that. So there's really not a point where you're like the top unless you're the business owner. But what's important is there's always people looking down too. And you want someone who's maybe a few years behind you looking at your role saying, I want that. And now what we're seeing is a lot of people that say, I don't want that. And that's why we're having a mass exodus out of corporate, because you're like, well, it looks like I have to either choose a family and not work here, or not have a family and keep working here, or so many other like thoughts and dialogues like that. But in terms of really being a strong leader is like, start doing this work yourself, show people what's possible, start to delegate, like you have to learn how to delegate. You have to learn how to manage your time. You have to learn how to prioritize the important things. And you have to teach other people how to do it too. And that's what inspires like a community of change. And it's really the only way that things will shift. It can't just be a bottom up approach. It has to be top down and bottom up. And that's the only way that shift is going to really sustainably happen.
So when you think of some of those, like I could be listening right now and go, yeah, like that all sounds great. Understand that we should be having these, checks and balances, whether you're a business owner of a major corporate or you're, a mid-size business owner or an entrepreneur, even just with your own team, right?
Yep.
Like, and you've got a team of people. What are some like well-being programming that you would say you should be integrating these things for your team, your staff, your company?
I mean, I love even the idea, and the reason why I go back to time a lot when we're working in corporate is because it's so tangible. Sometimes it's like, how do you feel? Or what's your energy? Or tell me, like, it takes like grooming to sometimes know what that really even feels like, or how your energy translates into a negative result. So what we start with is time. And that could look like, from a large perspective, like let people be out of office and like let them take off and let them be off. Right. So meaning creating a system in place for when somebody's out of the office, including yourself, where they don't feel pressured to check their email, where they feel like they can actually rest and rejuvenate, and then they can come back eager and ready to come back. So from a vacation perspective, a good vacation strategy. And then for a leader or anybody, I see a lot of, they say at the top, the propensity to work nights and weekends is much higher, which we can see why that's the case. But really, if you can, it's really important to have at least one day off a week. And some people might say, oh, that's impossible. If that's impossible, start with an afternoon off on a Sunday. Start small and then grow and make that a goal eventually to have a full day off every week. Eventually see if you can get to, instead of working till midnight every night, is it working till 10 or 9 p.m. and then having a hard stop. What we just continue to see is just time is wasted with FaceTime or just this feeling of guilt that you should always be available. And when you have a strong communication strategy and time management strategy with your team, it starts to allow people to feel like they can have a life again, and you can have a life again. And it's a win-win. And oftentimes, if we constrain our time, we're more productive in that time, because if I want to be off by 9 o'clock tonight, I have to get that task done tonight by 9 o'clock. So I'm not going to be scrolling. I'm not going to be wasting time shopping. I'm not going to like do something else that could be a complete distraction. I'm going to get my work done, and then I'm going to go home and enjoy my free time.
As a business owner, I love the idea of just taking small steps, and eventually, you can crunch your time, maybe having a day off. That for me is like, okay, when you look at it for like as a business owner, is that idea to trickle down to the staff or to your team as well, that your team would be having maybe like a 4-day work week as opposed to a 5-day? As a business owner, talking about working 7 days a week, fine, but your team isn't necessarily expected to be working 7 days a week. They're usually working 5 days a week. So would you be wanting to see that owner also infiltrate like this ideology into passing that on for their staff or for their teams?
Yeah. And I think the way I think about it, because there are so many different scenarios where sometimes people work 40-hour work weeks and they go home, they do a 9 to 5 and they go home anyway. But how can we be working when we're at work and focused and productive and happy? And how can we prevent like what they call presenteeism, which is this idea of like, I'm physically here at my computer, but I'm not mentally like sharp. I'm dealing with a lot of brain fog. I'm dealing with a lot of stress. And you have to imagine even every employee at some point, even in the past few years, has had their ups and downs of like their productivity drops when they're in survival mode and they're just trying to get through the beginning of the pandemic. So productivity levels dropped significantly. They've climbed up a bit, but they're still, they can waver depending on the person. The return to office created this whole big like lack of productivity for a dip again, because people were like, wait, I finally got a groove here. Now I'm back down. This is stressful. I don't want to commute. Right. So I think from a leadership perspective, it's working with people to get their work done in a way that works for them so that they can do well at work and do well at home. And that's why like the answer to that might look different for every person. Sure. But if you keep that at the forefront, then it creates the flexibility to have like a really inclusive timing schedule and working community.
I love it. Women in leadership. Let's shift a bit to that, because I love women. I love women in leadership. And I do believe that, there's really more and more this importance of women stepping up and rising into into their power and like stepping into their voice. And I believe that there's a really important correspondence between women's health and also then leadership and how they show up. And I'd love for you to just shed some light on, is that different for men, and like why so? Like, why is it so important for women?
Traditionally, women are still carrying the brunt of at-home responsibilities in addition to climbing the corporate ladder. Right. It's a statistic. It's not everybody. It's just saying that that's what we're still seeing. And at different phases of the career, that can be really hard. And so what I see is a lot of struggle at the almost at leadership level. And that's usually like the time where they're in super growth mode, growing a family, growing their career, growing a house, right? Like it's in growth mode. And that's a pretty stressful time. But when we're focused on women leaders, they're likely at that spot, but it's in maintenance mode. How do I not let it all crumble? And that could be a lot of pressure for a woman to hold. Like, it's just feels tight. It's like, I got to keep my family together. I got to keep my job together. I got to keep my clients happy. I got to keep, like, it's like corset for life, like just like stuck in it. And that's where it's another really tough place, because they feel like with one slip, one mistake, one, vacation sometimes, that if they take it, everything's going to fall apart. And that's what can become really hard. And when we talk about like women's health and leadership, it's like health is put at the bottom because they feel like, well, I can't focus on my health and have to focus on leadership, until there's a point where health is either going to like push its way in, like we talked about earlier, or you decide to let it in so that you can actually get to that next level. And that's kind of the secret that I say is like, once you start to bring it into your being a woman leader that's focused on your health and well-being, you're actually like unlocking this next level for what that means for you. And that's what I feel like is that's the fun part.
Totally. And your health is wealth. Like if you don't have that, it really doesn't even matter the success materially that you have created, because if you're not healthy to enjoy it, like what is the point? Right.
Absolutely.
So, and I do, there is this expectation, even as you were saying, like I know so many women that have been afraid to take even a full mat leave out of fear that their role is going to be replaced when they come, like before they come back, if they take the full mat leave.
Yep.
And I mean, even there's like other reasons around, like too, also, I think women having this ability to create other streams of income to allow them to really fortify their own finances and not be relying on somebody else to really dictate whether or not they do something like staying for the full mat leave.
Right.
And being able to have another source of income that will support the choices that they also want to make in life. And whether you're working for a company or you're a full-blown entrepreneur, you could be doing both. I mean, you started doing both, and like, obviously it could be really intense being in corporate and having like another full-blown company at the same time to the growth that it was. But having just that side hustle in general and not relying on just one avenue of income is also, I think, just such an important thing. More and more so, especially for like women,
100%. I mean, this is what like inspired me and like attracted me to you so much, is like, okay, freedom CEO. That's like, it's funny. I use the word freedom in my work too. And it's like, but I love we work so hard for what?
Yeah.
For what? Right? Like we think it's like, okay, we're working actually for that freedom, but we keep kicking the can being like, I have to be miserable, but freedom is coming. I'm going to need to like, forego my kids' piano recital, but freedom is on the other side. And when you get to that other side, either your whole family is going to be like graduated and in college or moved on in your life, or a lot of times like divorce happens because you put it all in on the career. And we equate this like hustle with hard work. And that doesn't have to be the case when we're thinking of like, how do I create freedom in my life? And so I love like that. I'm like, love what you do. And I love how you like position it, because you can have it all, even if it's not at the same time. But like, if you do it with the right intention, it's okay that you don't have it all at the same time, because the whole time you're feeling good while you're achieving at each level that you're kind of leveling up.
Totally. And, for me, sometimes it's about this journey of actually coming home to yourself and really reclaiming your life, reclaiming your health, reclaiming your finances. And sometimes that means making other sacrifices in order to do so, but you end up creating the actual freedom that you want in your life.
Mm-hmm.
And what does that even mean? Sometimes, like, I was actually listening to a podcast the other day, and it was interesting because it's very true. You ask people, like, what do you want in life? And they're like, I just want freedom. Well, like, what does that actually even mean? I want to make enough money so that I can do what I want when I want.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but what is that? Right? Like, what is doing what I want when I want? And for a lot of people, it really kind of stops there. And so when you get really clear on how you want your life to be, and that's for me where I'm like, it's this journey of coming home to yourself.
Mm-hmm.
When you get really, really clear, then you can start reclaiming your power of what you've given out, your time, your energy, your focus, maybe even like your family and relationships, right? Like what you're sacrificing all of this to build somebody else's dream so that they have the freedom. And that's like a lot of what I, talk to people sometimes, like, in conversations like this, but it's, if you're not building your own dream, you're literally building somebody else's who's benefiting and enjoying that freedom that you're literally working so hard. Some people are killing themselves over it, going into the hospital over it. For what?
Mm-hmm.
At what cost? And like you said at the beginning, like, who are you doing that for?
Right.
So it really challenges, not challenges. I think it's more, I think we just really need to have these honest conversations with ourselves at different, like, milestones in our life. Like you said, like doing something for 13 years and it's like, you can blink and a decade is gone. Right. And so it's really getting clear on, like, how do I want my life to be? How do I want to feel? How do I want to show up? What neighborhood do I want to live in? Like, what type of food do I want on my table? Literally, like, what type of quality of food do you want on your table? The people you want to surround yourself with, and then how and what are you going to be doing to support that vision, that mission? And is what you're currently doing taking you further away from it, or is it helping you get to where you want to go?
Mm-hmm.
And I think somebody even like yourself, right? Like, this is your whole world, even through like coaching, is having somebody who can plan out that life map, help with that roadmap, get clear on your goals, what you want to get done, and then working towards it, right? And having that accountability stepped in.
I love that. I think what you just shared, what came out so clearly is sometimes we think we're actually heading towards it, but like being really honest with yourself, like, are you directly getting to that end goal of freedom or whatever that specific goal for you is? Or are you just saying, like, I'm directionally going in the right direction? Because if I'm taking a plane from New York to the West Coast, a couple degrees difference is San Diego versus San Francisco. So if you don't know what direction you're specifically going in, you're going to end up in a place that you're like, oh, that wasn't exactly where I was hoping to be. And that's disappointing when you're putting all the effort into creating that result for yourself. Mm-hmm. So I love that you said that, because I think if we're being really honest with ourselves, it's not like, because we could be like, yeah, I'm getting there. Like, are you actually taking tangible steps to get where you want to go? Do you even know where you want to go? So I love that.
I love it too. I love it. Lauren, Kate, I need to ask you, I feel like we could do definitely a part 2 conversation and keep it going. When you think about being the CEO of your own life, you are the CEO of your business now as well. But when you think about being the CEO of your life, how has taking ownership over your decisions brought you freedom?
I mean, it's everything. Mindset is everything. And how has it brought me freedom? We have control over the things we think, the things that we say, and the things that we do. Everything else is out of our control. So freedom is not hoping that today is sunny or hoping that it doesn't rain on like your wedding day. It's like deciding it doesn't matter what the weather is and that it's going to be the best day ever. And that's what we have control over. And when we can find that freedom within, everything on the outside is great. And that's like the power. And for me, that's what's given me the most freedom of really being, and I don't want to say a master of my mind because I am a student of my mind, but like working towards mastery and really saying, all right, if I'm in a mood out of nowhere, where did that come from? What were the thoughts that like moved me from happy to annoyed? And how can I move past that? Knowing, yeah, the emotions are natural and we should experience, but we can also move past it and know that life is 50-50 and it's all good either way.
So true. Like acknowledge that. I see that. And knowing how to now shift and change that energy. Big time. I think it's such a powerful way to close, that you have freedom by understanding that you can't control what happens to you, but you can control your response. And that's how you're going to show up and deal with that. And I love that. Lauren, thank you so much for being here today. I appreciate your time and coming on the show.
Thank you so much.
Be back soon.
So fun. I know, we're just getting started. I love it. Thank you so much.
Did today's episode resonate with you? If you were listening and feeling like, yes, Shay, I needed this, or I am ready to do something and take action, then I want to give you a sneak peek invitation to what's coming in September. I am launching Reclaim, an intentional space for women who are ready to stop with the excuses and start taking action to reclaim the life they want to be living. In our crazy world today, who you surround yourself with matters. Your tribe matters. If you're feeling stuck, overwhelmed, not sure what to do next, how to gain more time, grow your finances, or experience more freedom, then Reclaim is for you. Reclaim is the solution to create more freedom and sovereignty in your life. This is where we become financially literate, learn about money, how to invest, become fortified in our mind and health. Ladies, it's time to become the CEO of your life to unleash more freedom, feel empowered, and create legacy for your family, all while being held by a group of badass women. Reclaim to rise and grow to thrive. Solutions for your sovereignty. To register and get all the details, click the link in the show notes or DM me on Instagram, the word Reclaim. Thanks for tuning into the Freedom CEO podcast. If you got value out of today's show, I would love for you to leave a review, as it will help my show reach other people as well. You know what to do. Download this episode, click the like and subscribe button. If you feel like spreading more love, hop over to Instagram and share today's show in your stories. Remember to tag Shane Vidyata and the Freedom CEO. My DMs are always open, so drop me a line. I'd love to connect. Until next time, keep owning your decisions to live a life of freedom. Live a life you love.